Hello, Board Now back with you and back to the lists. And this is going to be the second part of my top 50 science fiction movies, my top 50 personal favourites. So on the first video, I did numbers 50 to 41. You can find that up on the channel if you want to recap. In fact, I'll put the link in the description if I remember. So this is going to continue on in the same sort of path. So it's going to be 40 to 31. And this will be a 5-part video thing where I do 10 films per episode. So I'm going to get straight into it. So at number 40, I've got Total Recall. And I think for the first time on this list, I have to make it clear, I mean the original Total Recall. There was, of course, a remake with Colin Farrell, Kate Beckinsale, about 2012 sort of time, so, you know, a while ago now. But I know some people quite like that remake. It didn't really do much for me personally. I much prefer the original. From 1990, it's of course based on a Philip K. Dick novel. The novel We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, fitting title. So we have peak era Arnie playing construction worker Dennis Quaid, or Douglas Quaid, but it sort of reminds me of the Quaid acting family, who decide he wants to take a trip to Mars, but finds out that there is a conspiracy to keep him from leaving his home planet and life, and discovering that his whole life could be false. So it's a fun romp of an action movie. You get some brilliant effects as well, particularly in the latter half of the film during the Mars scene. And I think certainly for his American films, it's one of Paul Verhoeven's best. I think he creates a really fantastic futuristic universe. The money is well used in this on effects, and the design is really quite breathtaking at times. Some really fascinating, quirky characters. As I said, the stuff on Mars and set our film is really impressive, really dark as well. It really goes to some dark places. Some fine supporting performances as well. Michael Ironside, who's really good at playing, like, you know, sleazebags. He's on really great form as sort of the main slimy villain. As I said, colourful, eccentric characters, beautiful music actually by Jerry Goldsmith. That's a big part of the film as well. And it's one of those where it does a fine balance of being just a fun sort of pulpy like genre pick, but also being much darker than you would expect from what is a blockbuster, essentially. I think because of Arnie's involvement, it kind of elevates it into that sort of territory. And I think it's quite an easy one to sell in some ways, or it was back there. So it's maybe one of those films where the first half of it you kind of get the fun, romping sort of action Arnie pick, but the second it actually goes into much darker territory than you would expect. So for a blockbuster, it's very bold and it was very successful, and it holds up pretty much, I'd say. So that's Total Recall from 1990. Some fun dialogue in there as well. So the original Total Recall, my number 40. My number 49, more of a cult movie from the 70s this time, and it is Silent Running. So it's directed by Douglas Trumbull, who worked on 2001. I think this was his first film as a director. As I said, it is more of a cult movie starring the great character actor Bruce Dern, one of his best known roles as Freeman Lowell. And he's one of 4 crewmen aboard, and he is the resident botanist and ecologist who is carefully maintains a variety of plants for their eventual return to Earth and the refloration of the planet, basically. But when the mission is called off, halfway through, Lowell decides to go rogue. He turns on his crewmates. There's a bunch of killings, and he, in a desperate attempt, tries to save all the forest light and live out. So it's really one of the, if not the first, science fiction movies to look at environmental issues and, really play with those ideas. You get some quirky little robots on the ship, which are very sort of cute and quite endearing. So it has that sort of side to it as well. Really good performance from Bruce Dern. It's sort of telling, really, then you've got Joan Baez with her, very hippie-ish sort of background as on the soundtrack. She does the main score, some beautiful melodic folk numbers, which really makes sense for the atmosphere of the film. It's this gorgeous dreamlike sort of universe. It's one of those films where there's some, interesting ideas in there, but it's also a great, beautiful spectacle to just live in that universe. I mean, I can remember switching to TV now, but an episode of 6 Feet Under when two of the characters just bond over like this movie and they're watching it and they're so moved, and it's a moving scene watching them being moved by this film. But it's a very underrated film, I think, and it's worth saying it cost just 1 million or around 1 million to make, and well, they did great work with such a small budget for this kind of film. So Silent Running from 1972, my number 39. My number 38, going even further back now to one of the Universal monster classics, and that is The Invisible Man, 1933. So directed by James Whale. You've got Claude Rains on absolute top form here in the title role. He's this very slippery, sort of wicked, magnificent sort of presence, almost like the Joker in Batman when he's at his best. He gets so much across through physicality and through his voice and his mannerisms, and it's just a really entertaining villain, but with a real presence as well. It never becomes too goofy, but the film does have fun. It's obviously quite a cool little premise, and this is back in the day where obviously you hadn't had all these different versions, so you could do something quite sort of original with it. And it does a good job of the kind of show don't tell, or sort of building up to the reveal anyway. It does a good job of working around his appearance before you really get into the thick of the plot. So sort of it adheres to the classic monster conventions. And it does have a lot of fun with the premise, a lot of good set pieces. And I think, considering the limitations of the era in terms of budget and in terms of, things like obviously special effects, which really you didn't have any special effects back then, they do a good job of working around those It's a really entertaining, satisfying film. The Invisible Man is my number 38. My number 37, a 90s film this time, and another film I think is probably quite underrated, Gattaca from 1997. So debut film by Andrew Niccol, who has had really a mixed career since this, and he's never really repeated the greatness of this film. I quite enjoyed his film Sim 1, which I think was his follow-up. But yeah, Gattaca is still his best film. So a young Ethan Hawke plays a character who is discriminated against because of his genetics, not quite matching up. So he hatches a plot or a scheme with a disabled character by Jude Law, who offers Vincent his identity to achieve both of their dreams, which is to go into outer space. So it's looking at this very, now what's become a very modern idea of this kind of select dream pool, this kind of classist sort of system where you can be discriminated against just because of things like your genes or your genetics, and just this idea of sort of society and governments and hierarchies just separating people into different groups based on such ridiculously mundane little things. So it's a fascinating premise. I mean, it's wrapped up in this stylish, slow-burning noir, which works really well. I love the style of it and the mood. The three leads are really well cast, obviously. I mean, this is, I think, Jude Law before anyone really knew him, and he's really well cast as this steely sort of, kind of really spiky, uncomfortable sort of, middle class sort of character. I mean, I'm very hit and miss on Ethan Hawke, but I think it's this sort of film that really captures like this raw energy that he has and this sort of youthful charisma. And he's done a lot of good films, but I do find him a bit hit and miss. He pops up in a lot. I think he's good in this. And Uma Thurman, who plays the love interest who starts suspecting something might be afoot, she's really great in as well. She's really engaging, does a lot with, what could have been an underwritten role. You've got people like Alan Arkin, who's brilliantly, he is perfect casting as like the old sort of fashioned, kind of hard-nosed detective, if you like, who's investigating the case, but with a bit of a playful side to him. So again, really smart sci-fi of ideas. It's got a nicely paced plot, good characters, good leads, really effective. It's very, very underrated. Michael Nyman does a great job with the score as well. I think it's underrated. If you've never seen it, you should catch up with Gattaca. Not enough people have seen it. It's one I might do a review of on the channel one day. So that's 37. My number 36, returning to the more B-movie end of things here. This is Reanimator, 1985, which of course comes from a H.P. Lovecraft novel, and it's a big favourite of like horror fans, cult, sort of horror fans. Stuart Gordon directs, of course, this pulpy classic with just this edgy and perverse sci-fi horror sort of scene. Really fantastic practical effects. I really enjoyed like the prestige of Psycho on the main thing, which is really, really dramatic and really playful. That's by Richard Band, who has a great history of producing great horror soundtrack and scores. And just a nice, playful and messed up almost twist on the Frankenstein story. I mean, it is really bad taste at times, but in a very enjoyable B-movie sort of way. I mean, it's very, it really pushes things to the limit, but you just go with it. It's very, very, very enjoyable. The black comedy of it really satisfied me. Barbara Crampton, this is kind of the role which made her one of the most iconic scream queens, and she's really embraced that. She continues to appear in horror movies to this day, and she's fair play to her. She's really good in this, and she's gone on to have a really fine career. The ending is truly unforgettable of this film, and also it's worth saying, well, two more things. First of all, Jeffrey Combs really changed the game, I think, for like the kind of nerdy but really unhinged sort of scientific type figures. I mean, he's a really interesting character because he flirts between the two sides of good and evil almost in the film, but just his expressions, the heightened eyes and what have you, unforgettable. He's so funny in this film, Jeffrey Combs. The other thing to say, and this is just a little nerdy fact, is the fact then it's actually the other film set in the 1980s to feature a character of Hans Gruber. Unless there's a third. I mean, if there's three, that would be amazing. But of course, Die Hard the Alan Rickman character. But in this, there's another Hans Gruber, because the original Doctor who comes up with the reanimation idea and technology, he's called Hans Gruber, and he's obviously killed at the start. So they have it, and Reanimator did it first, because this is 85, Die Hard 88, so Reanimator beat them to the punch. But little known fact, there's another Hans Gruber in 1980 cinema. So Reanimator is my number 36. It's one I always enjoy rewatching. My number 35, a more recent film, it's Moon from 2009. And this is the film, I think, which really took Sam Rockwell to a whole new level. It's a very basic premise. I can't really say much about the plot without giving away the spoiler and the reveal in the middle. But Sam Rockwell plays an astronaut, Sam Bell, and he experiences a personal crisis nearing the end of a 3-year space mission, realizing he may not be alone. And that's kind of the only plot I can really give you without spoilers. I mean, I think the reveal happens halfway through the film, so it's debatable on whether I can actually mention it, but I don't think I will. I think if you've never seen the film, it's worth going into it with as little information as possible and just seeing that reveal and hopefully enjoying it. The debut by Duncan Jones, of course, the son of the late great David Bowie, a fantastic debut, which again, going back to Andrew Niccol Andrew Niccol, he has struggled to recapture what he did with Gattaca. I think it's probably fair to say, Duncan Jones has struggled to recapture Moon. I mean, his follow-up Source Code I really liked, and since then his films have been very middling, from what I've seen anyway, and there's been a couple of sort of stinkers in there. But Moon is a tremendous film. It's just one of those that benefits from being so low-key, really plays with modern themes. It's very thought-provoking, has a sort of a chilling atmosphere, but it's very beautiful visually as well. It's very assured in the pacing and the direction, very stripped back and full of ideas. Again, a lot of great sci-fi is about ideas and how it's sort of how science impacts on the human condition. This is a very moving story at times. Brilliant performance by Rockwell. He's totally commanding and natural. And I mean, if that performance didn't work, really the film would fall apart, because it is pretty much him all the way through. So it is one of those rare things in a film when a character is in it so much and all the way through, then so much of the burden is on that performance, and he delivers it in spades. He's just brilliant. There's a nice cameo from Kevin Spacey, or the voice of Kevin Spacey, as the hell-like computer system. So obviously owes a bit of a debt to 2001 there. But yeah, good voice work from Spacey. Clint Marcel's score is great as well. And yeah, it will be hard pressed to top it, but a really, really fine old-fashioned sort of science fiction film. That's Moon. And at number 34, Children of Men from 2006. So another more modern film, but this is Alfonso Cuarón, who has become sort of a favourite on the awards circuit the last few years, really building things up, but probably one of the most consistent current directors, really. So it's based on a P.D. James novel, so another one, very different sort of story for a P.D. James novel. It's set in a dystopian future, 2027, so I guess we'll see how things turn out when we get to that date. So humanity is on the verge of collapse because of reproduction being made illegal for the past 2 decades. But immigrants seeking asylum to the UK face very brutal opposition. So already you can see kind of this sort of link to what is going on now in the present and sort of contemporary tensions. It's a very subtle, very powerful, but really heartbreaking film. I mean, the emotional moments of the film really land. They really command your attention and really shake you, move you, really just grip me. And it's important that those moments do land. And it's sort of, it's negative but positive. I mean, the satire is very powerful and it doesn't sugarcoat it, but I think at the same time there is positivity as well. I think it does celebrate the human spirit. It does celebrate the togetherness and how I think there will always be people who will come together and fight evil, or just be there to protect other human beings who are vulnerable, and that fact should never be lost. I know in the times we're in, it's maybe easy to be cynical and forget that, but I think those, there's good and bad in all of us. I mean, I think that's worth remembering, and I think this film does celebrate the human spirit, which I think is kind of beautiful. Really good bond between the characters. I did find it, as I said, a touching film at time, but never loses track of its core message, which is important. A dark vision of the future, very gritty, really fine, a somber casting. I think Julianne Moore's obviously great. Clive Owen, who's basically the lead, is another one who I find very hit and miss. He's been in a lot of bad films, and some films, depending on the casting, I find him very wooden in. I think he's got that classic leading man type look and that very reserved kind of charisma to him, so I think it sort of suits certain roles better than others. But he's really well cast in this, and he gives a really good performance. He's very convincing. Michael Caine pops up in a nice little cameo. Beautiful use of music and tension. It's another. I mean, it is quite a big movie. I think a lot of people know this. It was maybe a bigger hit than you would expect. I think it got quite a big release, but it's still quite underrated, I think. But that's Children of Men from 2006. My number 34. My number 33. So I've gone the art house end of things again. And this is a Korean film. And it is Save the Green Planet from 2003. So this is a film I watched for the first time recently. It absolutely knocked my socks off. It's an eye-popping, real cult sort of classic, really inventive, really does a whole different bunch of things. I mean, the main premise is the main character is Byung-gyu, a man who believes that aliens from Andromeda are about to attack the Earth, and that he is the only one who can prevent them. And with his childlike circus performer girlfriend, he kidnaps a powerful pharmaceutical executive, you can tell I'm reading this out, who he believes is the top-ranking extraterrestrial able to contact the Andromeda Prince during the upcoming collapse. And so he imprisons the man in his basement and questions him because he suspects that he killed his previous girlfriend and that he is this alien. And so it really plays with this idea because, throughout the film you get the sense, and this isn't the first time that he's imprisoned other people he suspects of being alien. So it plays on that paranoia. It does bring into question, is this guy just really paranoid? Is he just a maniac, basically? Or is he onto something? And it does play that really well. There's real tension. But yeah, it's a very unique, very niche sort of cult film, stylishly designed. It has this very nihilistic black comic tone, which a lot of sort of Asian cinema has, and it works very well if you're into that sort of thing. convincing performances. I mean, the use of music is just amazing. There's like this kick-ass like punk rock cover of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," which plays I think a couple of times over the film, but it's just so cool. It just gets you in the mood. It's a crazy trip of a film. Like you truly get immersed and high on it. And there is true tension. There's true style. It's funny in a dark sort of way. It's atmospheric. It's stylish. It's a complete package. Really has this sort of, it has a logic all of its own, like a beautiful, like dreamlike logic. Um, and the ending is handled brilliantly. The ending is like really. I mean, there's a twist in the tale, but also it is quite ambiguously ending, which I really love. And I do like that they introduce like a kind of environmental type argument into such a film. You know, it's a different thing to do. It's a complete unique film. Very rarely do you see a film, and regardless of whether you like it or not, you'll say, well, I've never seen a film quite like that before. But this is one of those rare exceptions. Great cult gem. Save the Green Planet from 2003, and that's a film I'll definitely do a review of on the channel one day. Tremendous film. I can't wait to watch it again. My number 32 is Arrival from 2016, so a very recent film. And this is another great example of this little. I mean, it was a mainstream movie, but it was a surprise mainstream hit. It's this little gem, again, which is based on ideas, based on originality, and was a great independent success because for modern films, for modern sci-fi films, it had quite a low budget, and it made that back twice over. So the film follows Louise Banks, Amy Adams, one of the great modern actresses, a linguist, and she's enlisted by the US Army to discover how to communicate with aliens who arrived on Earth before tensions lead to the war. And throughout we get flashbacks back and forth between her past and what's happening in the present. And I'm not always a big fan of flashbacks in movies. I think a lot of times they take you out of the drama and they don't really add that much. But this is a rare example where actually it does, where the flashbacks add something to what's happening in the present, add to the character of Louise Banks, really gives her good depth. Really, there's reveals in the flashbacks that really add to what's happening in the present. Amy Adams is just, you know, just brilliant in the lead role, so commanding, so convincing, so subtle. It's again refreshing to see a really strong female character, a really impressive, layered female character in a sci-fi movie. I mean, obviously it's more common nowadays, but it's, you know, over the years, sci-fi hasn't always been the best in representing strong females. And the fact that, I mean, because obviously there's, you know, you get her personal life and you get her past with her child and stuff like that, you know, and that's really well done. But the fact is, she's a really well-rounded character who feels very independent, very tough, very smart. Good support performance by Jeremy Renner. I think this is the film that convinced me a bit more about him. When he popped up in other films, I hadn't been that convinced. I mean, I think he's got charisma and a good look, but I've never really been convinced that he's much more than that, but he was good in this film too. And it's just a great film about ideas and this idea of language. And it's really subtle as well, like these standoff and these back and forth between her and what essentially is a screen, this wall of you know, the aliens on the other side. And the film benefits from kind of not really seeing them, not really seeing the other side, but it really plays with this idea of language, communication, and accepting, you know, others, if you like, people or life or other life forms of difference, and being interested in that. So again, it's a film of ideas. It's a film about the human condition, like so much of sci-fi. It's a really gripping, moving, engrossing watch. Brilliantly directed, of course, by Denis Villeneuve, who's going to tackle Dune this year. He made a great job of the Blade Runner sequel. So really one of the hottest directors around at this point. And I mentioned the budget. It cost just 47 million and it made 200 million. So really modern Hollywood need to look at examples like this and follow suit. That they need, I mean, obviously it was a Hollywood movie, so it's an example that a smart, intelligent blockbuster, still with spectacle, still spectacular moments and visuals, but it was an intelligent, slow burning film with rich characters, and yet it was a big hit. It's shown that can happen, and that audience don't always want things to be dumbed down. So, and at the end of the day, it was made on the cheap, so it's costing them less money to make as well. So yeah, Hollywood needs to be producing more movies like that. Like this is basically the message. And I just have to say also, Amy Adams cruelly robbed at the Oscars. I mean, there were two performances that year from her that probably should have been nominated. The other was Nocturnal Animals. She's brilliant in both. Neither were nominated. Absolutely disgraceful. I think she might have been nominated at the BAFTAs for Nocturnal Animals, but she's great in both. I mean, she's just amazing actress. Obviously, great in Sharp Objects, the miniseries, which was on my top 20 TV shows list. And I mean, yeah, how she didn't get an Oscar nomination for this, I do not know. She's also had this Janis Joplin biopic film on the sidelines for years. She's trying to get it produced. Hollywood just won't produce it. I really don't get it. But anyway, Amy Adams, amazing in Arrival, a tremendous little sci-fi gem, and proof then cinema goers do want intelligent sci-fi. So that's number 32. So number 31, speaking of, successful blockbuster type films, and it's the first time I'm going Star Trek on this list. There may be more, there may be not. My 31 is Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home from 1986. So it's the end of a trilogy of sorts, because the story is like connected to the Wrath of Khan and the Search of Spock that came before. It's directed by Leonard Nimoy himself, who does a nice sort of slick job with it. Obviously understands the material very well. I think it was a nice change of direction too, after the heavy and melodramatic direction that Search for Spock took. And I mean, if you don't know the plot, they're sort of intent on returning home to face trial for their actions in the previous film, so it is connected to the previous film. And the former crew of the USS Enterprise finds their planet in danger from an alien probe, now attempting to contact now extinct humpback whales. So the crew travel to Earth's past to find whales who can answer the probe's call. So a nice sort of time travel type plot there. And I think the fresh setting them on Earth and all this fish out of water type comedy, it really freshens things up a lot. And it's a rip-roaring fun adventure, which is often when Star Trek is at its best. There's some wonderful gags, as I said. I mean, Spock putting the Vulcan grip on the punk on the bus because he's like blaring his stereo out and is then rude when they tell him to turn. It's just brilliant. The people clash, clapping. A great moment. There's political savvy jokes. I mean, this is the era of the Cold War, and that you get It's Chekhov, isn't it? Running around asking Americans if they've seen the nuclear vessels, or vessels as he said. Just brilliant. I mean, imagine that during the 1980s. Catherine Hicks is a likeable supporting part as kind of the love interest, but she's likeable and smart. It's a film full of heart, beautiful music. I think the change of pace and having it set on Earth and all these different gags and things happening was just a nice change of direction, and it worked really well. It's a really successful, fun blockbuster. As I said, full of heart, some nice character moments. It has pretty much everything you would want from a Star Trek adventure. Ticks all the boxes. I quite like the fact that the Catherine Hicks character, spoiler, does actually go into space at the end and joins like the Starfleet team. She has an ongoing role there. I do like that. A lot of times they'll come down to it and the human will just stay on Earth, but I do like that was something different. But very enjoyable film. Star Trek for the Voyage Home is my number 31, and that brings to the end part 2 of my top 50 sci-fi movies. Let me know what you think of my picks in the comments below. Again, if you want to chip in with your own choices, then please do so, and I'll be back soon with part 3, which of course will be 30 to 21. Thanks for watching. See you guys again.